Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz has arrived in Ankara for the NATO summit as well, underscoring Berlin's commitment to strengthening NATO's collective defense. Before departing Berlin, Chancellor Friedrich Merz stressed that Germany has doubled its defense spending since 2022, saying the increase was necessary for the country's defense and security. Following decades of post-Cold War austerity, Germany has sharply increased military investments since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, with its defense budget set to exceed the equivalent of $125 billion in 2027. Germany's armed forces expanded rapidly in the early 1960s and stayed at around 500,000 personnel during the Cold War. After German reunification in the early 1990s, those numbers fell dramatically before leveling out at under 200,000. You can see the dip in 2011 when Germany ended conscription, a debate that's recently been reopened here. Well, DW's Max Hofmann, the head of our Berlin bureau, joins us now from the summit. He's traveled there with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Max, Europe is under huge pressure, of course, to take on more responsibility for its own defense. What does this mean specifically for Germany?
I think, Terry, what we need to remember in the beginning is that Germany has already taken on a lot more responsibility than in the past. That image that we, or a lot of people had of Germany being a free rider in NATO, that is a thing of the past. It has really stepped up financially, is spending double what it spent on defense 4 years ago when the war in Ukraine started. And it's also taking over more command posts in NATO. Having said that, of course, what's really lacking is the buildup of military capabilities, or at least the military capabilities, because that's what really takes time. German Chancellor Merz famously said that he wanted to establish the largest and the most powerful conventional army in Europe. And if he really is serious about that, that is just a long way and will take many more years to establish.
What does this rush to boost military spending in NATO and beyond mean for German defense companies, Max?
Well, generally, the environment for defense companies is very favorable at the moment because there's just so much money going around. That doesn't mean that all of the defense companies are doing well. It really depends on the projects. If a project fails for a certain company, then the stock will go down, which happened for Rheinmetall lately. But here, what's being discussed is a new deal by TKMS, a joint venture with the Norwegians, and they're selling up to 12 submarines to the Canadians. That is a huge deal. It might even be the biggest defense deal in the history of Germany. So that's what's being put in the limelight here at the NATO summit. Obviously, the German Chancellor even met his Canadian and Norwegian counterpart here, the prime ministers of those countries, to celebrate that deal together. And if I may, there was a sort of amusing episode there where Carney, the Canadian prime minister, told the Norwegian that he had to also make the Norwegian striker Haaland part of that deal. Haaland, of course, the striker who's being super successful at the World Cup at the moment, but the Norwegian prime minister said that was not in the cards.
Okay. So the summit is continuing. Tomorrow is another day, another big day. What are Chancellor Merz's priorities at this NATO summit, Max? What would make a successful summit from his perspective?
Well, besides from keeping the U.S. President Donald Trump in the fold, as you've already discussed with my colleague Terry Schultz, the main priority for the Germans is obviously with Ukraine, because it's a threat. Russia's a threat that's so close to Germany. And so the Germans really want a pledge for Ukraine to have a sign of unity from here towards Russia, saying that they all stand behind Ukraine, and obviously get more money for Ukraine. That seems to be a done deal from the Europeans, with 70 billion euros this year and another 70 billion euros next year. So that is very important financially, and to also have that pledge.
Well, there's just no getting around, the Donald Trump in the room. How would you describe Chancellor Merz's rapport with President Trump? Max?
It's hard to tell at the moment, and as far as we can tell, of course that can change throughout the summit, is there's not going to be a bilateral meeting between the German Chancellor Merz and President Trump. Could happen spontaneously, you don't know. But the remarks that Trump made on arrival here don't bode that well, because he heavily criticized NATO allies, and he named some of them, among them Germany. We know that in the past weeks, the relationship between Merz and Trump has been contentious. Time might smooth things over, but as of now, it seems to be more in this rocky territory, maybe in a phase where things relax a little bit. But of course, a NATO summit like this might stir them up again, because for Donald Trump, it's not Ukraine on the forefront of things, but Iran. And we heard what he thinks about that before.
Max, thank you so much. DW's Max Hofmann, the head of our Berlin bureau. German naval shipbuilder TKMS has secured a multi-billion-euro contract from Canada to build up to 12 submarines. The vessels will be constructed at the company's shipyards in Kiel and Wismar, two coastal towns in northern Germany, before being delivered to North America. For TKMS, it's the third NATO partner who acquires the new 212 CD submarine after purchases for the German and Norwegian Navy.
Canada's decision to join Norway on the program is both a windfall for German shipbuilder TKMS and a geostrategic statement. The deal itself is worth up to 62 billion euros, according to media reports, and is expected to create hundreds of new jobs in German shipyards. It also stands to bring NATO allies Canada and Germany closer together, economically and strategically, as submarines need decades-long maintenance, technology transfer, and updates. It's Canada's largest ever procurement project, and according to the Prime Minister, it's critical to the country's security.
These new submarines, combined with the world's second largest fleet of icebreakers, combined with new aircraft, new radar, more missiles and drones, better cyber defenses, new ports and air bases, are allowing Canada to assert our full sovereignty in the Arctic.
The 212 CD submarine is among the most advanced conventional submarines ever built. The fuel cell air-independent propulsion allows for more than 40 days fully submerged in near total silence. Canada rejected a bid from South Korea's Hanwha Group. TKMS now hopes the growing partnership can make the 212 CD sub the new NATO standard, making further participation from other nations even more attractive. And the future looks bright beyond NATO partners. TKMS is also nearing the finalization of a deal with India to build 6 submarines. It's also pitching U-boats to the Philippine Navy, which is seeking to acquire its first submarines ever.